I'm just going to get going because I've only got 20 minutes and a lot of road to cover here. So let's go. The mysteries of the universe. Just when science thinks one is resolved, another seems to pop up. Among some of the most intriguing and surprising to physicists are represented by the theories of inflation and the darks, which are the invisibles, and the holographic principle of the manifestation of the universe. Today I'll focus primarily on that holographic principle, mostly as it relates to quantum mechanics and universal manifestation. It has some rather striking parallels with the theory of the manifestation of the universe that's put forward by the ancient Eastern tradition of Kashmir Shaivism. Kashmir Shaivism is a tradition that is scientific in that it encompasses a scientific treatment of the nature of both cosmology and our ordinary everyday objective world, as well as being a system of human psychospiritual development. A revered Indian sage of the 20th century, Swami Muktananda, commenting on a specific text of Kashmir Shaivism called the Spanda Karakas, or Spanda, states that the tenets of Spanda are scientific, and that the notions of the world being created from the vibration of the first explosion, or the Big Bang, and the universe continuing to expand, have always been contained in the knowledge of Spanda and other Shiva teachings that go back, their roots are lost in time. Perhaps consideration of even some of the knowledge contained in this ancient science can serve to inspire solutions to the conundrums of modern science. Surveying quantum physics, in the words of quantum physicist Vidral, quantum behavior eludes visualization and common sense. It forces us to rethink how we look at the universe and accept a new and unfamiliar picture of our world. Quantum mechanics is not just about tiny particles anymore, but applies to everything in the universe, even to us humans. In addition, quantum physics is almost phrased in terms of information processing, suggesting that you'll find information processing at the root of everything. The holographic principle came about as a sort of a byproduct of attempts to study features of black holes and to square the theory of gravity with quantum mechanics. It prompted theoretical particle physicist Leonard Susskind, who this is, to say one of the strangest discoveries of modern physics is that the world is a kind of a holographic image. In the context of the holographic principle, the word hologram has a specific definition, and Susskind has given one as a two-dimensional image, an image on a piece of film that allows you to unambiguously reconstruct full-blown three-dimensional images. A hologram is a two-dimensional image, but one that has the full information of a three-dimensional scene. However, if you look at the two-dimensional film that contains the information, there's nothing that's recognizable. The image in that film is completely scrambled with no decoding dictionary provided. And from Jacob Bekenstein, our universe, which we perceive to have three spatial dimensions, might instead be written on a two-dimensional surface like a hologram. So is there one reality that creates the other, or one reality that projects itself from itself into what is apparently also itself? Applied to the universe, the holographic principle states that three-dimensional space is just one version of reality. The other version exists on a flat 2D holographic film-like surface billions of light years away at the edge of the cosmos. The three-dimensional universe emerges from the physics of the two-dimensional universe, essentially like a holographic image arises from a hologram. That two-dimensional surface out there on the universe's boundary is encoded with information, as you see on these two spheres. Encoded with information, presumably with all that is in or ever is likely to be in the universe. Bekenstein states this two-dimensional surface can be considered as the interior light-like surface of a spherical shell whose boundary goes to infinity. In other words, as an anti-de Sitter space, and we're just going to skim the surface of that. In the service of projecting the 3D reality, a brief burst of light is issued simultaneously and perpendicularly from all over one side of the surface. As these light rays must be able to converge, the interior surface works as a suitable 2D surface, which is what they've been talking about. So as you can see, this apple coated in subatomic quarks and gluons on the 2D surface of an anti de Sitter space results in a 3D holographic type image inside. Here's a projection of a clown from Juan Moldacena into 3D space-time from the array of information on another 2D surface of the sphere. When this one remotely does resemble the clown below as a kind of an illustration. With respect to perspective in the holographic principle, the theories that came together to create the holographic principle predict that the number of dimensions in reality could be a matter of perspective, and therefore we could add a matter of perception in terms of human involvement in the process of manifesting the universe for ourselves. In effect, reality could obey one set of laws, including gravity, in 3 dimensions, or equivalently, obey a second different set of laws that operate in 2 dimensions where gravity doesn't exist. Both versions of reality would be completely legit, yet each is acting in spaces of a different dimension. And therefore, there is a difference in perspective and perception represented as well. A parallel with a key concept in Kashmir Shaivism, the theory of reflection. Similarly, in this model of manifestation in Kashmir Shaivism, we have a construction of the universe spherically. In this case, it is described as 2 cup-shaped mirrors glued together lip to lip in a manner of speaking, and forming the same type of spherical 3D anti-de Sitter space with a mirrored 2D boundary set at infinity to describe the universe, believe it or not. And this is an ancient tradition whose history is lost in antiquity. This mirror is not a typical mirror, however. It's not reflecting something that exists outside it, but is reflecting, or perhaps more accurately projecting, the everything that's inside it to the 3D reality. Everything, or all that is ever likely to be in the universe, is said to be contained within that spherical mirrored shell, manifesting the 3D reality from inside itself into the sphere that it bounds, while retaining its information, which would be the physics way of describing it, or while remaining full and unchanged, which would be the Kashmir Shaivism terminology for the same phenomena. That the boundary of the sphere goes to infinity implies that there exists nothing else external to the universe. That's all there is. So soberingly, it can also imply that since we're the 3D version, apparently, we also must be the 2D version. Since there's nothing else up there, we also must be the 2D version, and pretty much it's as above, so below. This notion has not been a possibility posited from the perspective of physics, but it is in Kashmir Shaivism, and we'll see this later. But right now I want to go back to the cups. That's why they're still sitting there. Within the material that forms the cups themselves, I want to explain that a little more, that make up a spherical shell, are elements of both light and sound. It's sort of like when electrical wiring is embedded or sandwiched in a ceramic, so it's actually in the cup itself. One cup's shell element or essence is light, and the other cup's essence is sound. At this level of manifestation in Kashmir Shaivism, there are not your typical electromagnetic and acoustic waves, but rather EM and acoustic waves are inherent in them. So an analysis of them with respect to this level of manifestation works in that sense. Light in the first cup is sometimes called that which shines and radiates, which brings objects forth, making them manifest. Sound in the second cup at this stage of manifestation is inaudible, an extremely subtle vibration or unstruck sound in the form of the phonemes or letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, combined in such a way that a contemporary scholar of Kashmir Shaivism has called them shaken, not stirred. So this encoding, like that on the surface of the sphere in the holographic principle, would also not be legible to a perceiver. Once the cups are glued together, the waves in each cup shell follow a tendency to race around their newly formed sphere, mingling with and pervading each other. This is an analog in something called the whispering gallery waves or modes, which is a phenomena originally discovered in St. Paul's Cathedral in London for sound in the late 1800s by Rayleigh, and later generalized to light and other kinds of waves, including gravity waves around a black hole, actually. It is relevant to the sciences of acousto-optics and optoacoustics. It lends credence to this notion of blending and mingling of light waves and sound waves as they both travel around spherical and quasi-spherical shapes in this way. Here, this interaction is the likely explanation, at least in part, for how information that's contained in the sound symbols, literally written or on or in that 2D reality, as Bekenstein described information being written for the holographic 2D reality previously, that it's projected into the 3D reality. The effect of the light on the sound in potential form appears to both activate and facilitate the transmission of those sound forms into another dimension. It may also transform the sound into another type of manifestation of the sound form. And in some respects, it's a kind of transduction or phase transition that's taking place. So in the case of Kashmir Shaivism, that which is written in the 2D reality is the Sanskrit alphabet or phonemes, and all the information that they carry in the infinite number of possible combinations and permutations that they form. It's sort of like big, big, big data, the potential for really big, big data. Why would the information on this 2D surface be in the form of Sanskrit phonemes? Sanskrit's an ancient language which began as a spoken language and later, obviously, as a written one. 3 kinds of scientific Sanskrit developed: grammatical, logical, and mathematical. The mathematical type remained the least artificial, and the grammatical the most. But even the grammatical type had an artificial intelligence researcher who investigated Sanskrit for NASA state Sanskrit as a natural language can serve as an artificial language also. And therefore, much work in artificial intelligence has been reinventing a wheel millennia old. This was a spoken language. They were basically speaking in machine language. A number of scholars of Sanskrit and the history of mathematics indicate that Sanskrit is algebraic, to the point of being suggestive that Sanskrit is the original basis of algebra, with linear, simultaneous, and intermediate equations evidenced in early scholarly work. For both quantum mechanics and Kashmir Shaivism, the information in or on that boundary surface is projected to the 3D realm via flashes or pulsations of light coming from the inside of the boundary of the sphere, as Bekenstein described, presumably with the addition of some level of sound in the Kashmir Shaivism model. From the Kashmir Shaivism perspective, in the process of manifestation, pulsations of light, called abhasas, are said to continuously flash forth, creating objects and their activities as frames in a movie, or the ever-changing pixels on a TV or computer screen, thus giving the universe and everything in it the appearance of solidity, continuous stable existence, and smooth motion, or apparent smoothness of movement through space. The cup-shaped mirror analogy, in addition to alluding to the light-like nature of the sphere's boundary, so to speak, also makes the point that just as a reflection is not in any way different from the mirror, but appears to be something different, the manifestations or abhasas are not different from absolute consciousness, which in this system is called Shiva, and yet appear as different. The manifestations, the 3D world, or abhasas, are nothing but the ideation of the universal consciousness appearing as external to the empirical subject, says the sage Shema Raja. According to its scholars, the entryway to Kashmir Shaivism is through its model of manifestation of the universe. This model is depicted by 36 elements or principles called tattvas, not to be confused with what Don was talking about before. This is a different take on tattvas. I'm showing you an abbreviated chart. You're not seeing the whole 36. But it is a complete science of the physical manifestation of the universe, while simultaneously being a complete psychology and outline of human development. But in other words, it's a model of both the universe and a human being. In the upper range there of the tattvas is where manifestation is said to begin, at the top where absolute consciousness and then the immanent and higher states of consciousness are in the second box. And as the highest level of human evolution, it's considered who we really are. At this level of reality, natural laws in time do not exist, so neither would gravity, like on the 2D holographic surface of quantum physics. And these upper realms of the tattvas, or manifestation, are in a different phase, state, realm, or dimension than is our physically manifesting universe, which is down where it says Earth element tattva 36. Briefly, the middle and bottom sections describe a logical progression of manifestation that culminates ultimately in the physically manifested material world. It's a two-way model. You can go up and down. It goes up and down. Involution into matter and evolution into the higher dimensions of reality. Inherent in the tattvas is the notion of transmutation of energy, or prana, that applies both in the external world with energy and with states of consciousness in the internal. It is in some ways akin to the concept of phase transitions found in physics. Superposition is another scientific phenomenon which can be used to describe the nature of the tattvas in a sense. In analogy to the relationship between classical and quantum phenomena, the most relevant issue may not be size, which is more about relativity, but superposition, with quantum phenomena underlying the classical. Similarly, each tattva is included within and underlies all the others. Elaborating a little bit further here, like virtually all Eastern science traditions, Kashmir Shaivism represents at once both the symbolic and the literal, all the while with the underlying knowledge that everything is consciousness. There are many symbolic and literal terms for Shiva and Shakti, for example. Light for Shiva, the awareness of light for Shakti. Power holder for Shiva, its power in Shakti. Creative aspect of transcendent Shiva, the energy of manifest Shiva. Considering Shiva as the term Shiva, this light is not the light that can be seen with the eyes, but the light by which the eyes see. This light is the capacity of consciousness to make the universe manifest. It shines and radiates. And with respect to the term Shakti, from the Pratibhinya Hridayam, by the power of her own will, Shakti unfolds the universe on her own screen, in herself as the basis of the universe. Does all this sound a little familiar? Both terms, Shiva and Shakti, have obvious parallels to the descriptors of that 2D reality in the holographic principle. With Shiva, it's the shining and radiating that corresponds to the flashes of light coming from the inside boundary of the sphere. For Shakti, the obvious configuration of a 2D surface being like a sheet or a screen. And remembering Susskind's reference when describing that 3D reality's content being contained on a computer screen. Looking back at perspective again, per Kashmir Shaivism, from the reality of our ordinary day-to-day perspective, we can't perceive the reality from whence ours is projected, just as in the case of quantum mechanics, where we literally can't read it. But Kashmir Shaivism also tells us that who we think we are, we of this 3D world, isn't in reality who we really are. It reveals that in reality, we are absolute consciousness, ultimate reality. They're all names for the same thing. That's where the human evolutionary developmental science of Kashmir Shaivism comes in. It's designed to help us to recognize or realize who and what we really are and to become that. One of the great sages of Kashmir Shaivism has said that the universe exists for our development and for no other reason. The manifestation model states that absolute consciousness becomes the universe, and that this consciousness manifests into everything while staying the same, transcendent, through the series of the 36 tattvas, ending up in the element of earth and the material world. However, as this model is of both the universe and a human being, it is said that who we really are is the tattva at the top, the absolute consciousness, and who we think we are down here in material reality is a function of the processes that manifest physical reality and a function of our perspective, which is that of a living being manifested in the material 3D world. So by analogy, If everything is coming from this two-dimensional world, wouldn't you rather be where the action is there, calling the shots, than where the result of the action is here, taking the shots? Being the projector instead of the projectee? Being universal reality and making it happen for you instead of living mundane reality and having it happen to you? It's our choice, and it's the biggest perk of being human. Thank you for listening.
Nice talk, Maria. Actually, I'm working for the past 20 years. I'm working on Indian science, and trying to find a point where we can separate the ancient Indian science from the religion, but yet make it, be spiritual. So the point is that all these phenomenon or the philosophy, what you're talking, as a common thing, any Indian philosophy, that's what I found out from reading at least 300 books in Tamil. Tamil is an ancient language, and Sanskrit, and they all say the same point, that the consciousness becomes the physical universe, and Shiva and Shakti is just the representation. So we try to form this as a theory, and I'm working with the Indian government to separate this and have a different science. Parallelly, you learn the modern science and the Indian science. So I think I would like to invite you as part of our, this research. So.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. I would love to do that. I think it needs to happen. I really do. Because I scratched the surface. We could have gone into inflation, because Shaivism also has a description of the universe beginning to be put into manifestation and stopping, believe it or not. That's also in the upper tattvas when you look at it. There's lots of stuff, and you're right, it's not just in Shaivism. It's in Vedanta, it's in so many of the others. But thank you for the comments.
Thank you. That really was a wonderful talk. I met the man that you quoted on the screen, Swami Muktananda, and what I'm struck with listening to your talk is, on the one hand, it was clear that he lived the experience of that highest state.
Right.
But what I'm remembering with some embarrassment is that he would also go out to say, this is a science. And I would think, well, that's kind of sweet of you to think it's a science. Well, it really is the science, but if you want to put it that way. But I'm realizing that, as I've realized many times before, the last laugh was on me. That really is a science, and you've done a tremendous job to bring it forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Perhaps light was thought for a long time to be a particle or a wave.
Yes.
And quantum physics says it's both.
Yes.
And that is what normal light is, what we see. And Einstein did a lot of work about light. And his theory is four-dimensional. What are you doing with the fourth dimension in your concept?
Okay, I think when these traditions use the word light, it's multi-layered, actually. Yes, there's that element of what we call light and what Western science calls light and analyzes that way. But this is also, there are more dimensions to it that very, very, very likely at some point science will discover. So I hadn't really thought in terms of four dimensions of it, but I would say as a more global answer that there's way more to the word light. When they translate all this from Sanskrit too, Sanskrit's not an easy translate. There aren't very many people who do it, and there are some who do it very well and some who do not. And you can kind of tell by the scholarship of it who's doing what. But right now it's a bit of a gray area, and we'll just have to wait and see how even the words, the terminology goes, and how science discovers more and more. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Maria.